if you like. I'd like to welcome everyone to our April Women in Business online gathering for 2021. We appreciate you tuning in as we continue our virtual format. It is our goal to continue to support and strengthen each other through encouragement, motivation, and networking while still being physically distant. Just a reminder, we are recording this presentation and we respectfully request that you please mute yourself if you're not talking so that we don't receive feedback on the recording. I'll first start our meeting off with a bit of history. Did you know that on April the 28th in 1993, the first Take Our Daughters to Work Day occurred? The event, founded by Gloria Steinem and the Ms. Foundation for Women, later became Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day in 2003. The day is celebrated annually on the fourth Thursday of April. According to the nonprofit organization Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Foundation, the program exists to create a more equitable world, enabling children to discover opportunities, build self-esteem, and envision their futures. The day also demonstrates the purpose of and possibilities associated with education to girls and boys, and it's meant to show them how adults balance their work and family lives. So this year, the virtual event will be on Thursday, April the 22nd, 2021. This year's theme is Boldly Moving Forward. The virtual event will include career introductions from hosts, interactive features, and content representing several different career clusters, including STEM, business, the arts, health sciences, marketing, and more. The program is designed to be both fun and educational, and it's for children between the ages of 8 to 18. For more information, you can go to daughtersandstowork.org. However, you can also host your own Bring Your Child to Work Day by doing some general activities like mock interviews, workplace tours, interactive presentation with your fellow coworkers and departments, or even just taking them to lunch with parent-child lunches. If you do decide to take part this year, please take some pictures and send them to Donna so that we can create a slideshow for our upcoming Women in Business webpage. Next, I'd like to share with you some of our U.S. women's history for the month of April. On April 2nd, 1931, 17-year-old Jackie Mitchell, the second woman to play baseball in the all-male minor leagues, pitched an exhibition game against the New York Yankees and struck out both Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. The next day, the baseball commissioner voided her contract, claiming baseball was just too strenuous for women, and the ban was not overturned until 1992. On April 7th, 1805, Sacagawea began helping the Lewis and Clark expedition as an interpreter. And on April 22nd, also known as Earth Day, let's honor Rachel Carson, a woman who changed America and greatly influenced the environmental movement with her revolutionary book, Silent Spring. Today on the National Day calendar, April 15th is Purple Up Day. So you'll notice I wore my little purple. Today recognizes some of the military's most unsung heroes, their children. The day encourages everyone to wear purple, representing all branches of the military and showing unity with each other. All across the country and around the world, military children play a significant role in their schools, youth organizations, and communities. And when we wear purple in their honor, we let them know that we support them in all branches of the military. So whether they are part of the military family for a short while or their entire childhood, the military child deserves to know that they have the support of their community. Lastly, I want to say a big thank you to Christy Cox, as always, who's on top, and the Greene County Libraries for hosting our video conference today. In appreciation, I wanted to provide Christy some time to speak. So Christy, I pass the mic to you.
Thank you. The one big thing that I have to announce to everyone is this week we decided to have our Books and Wine fundraiser in person this year. It's not until October the 5th at Caesars Creek Vineyard. So if you want to save the date, I don't have any details on caterer or anything like that, but by this summer you can look for details. So thanks for all of you for supporting my event in the past. It's the only fundraiser we do all year, and all the money goes to support our Dolly Parton Imagination Library program right here in Greene County.
Thanks, Christy. It's going to be exciting. Hopefully this summer we'll be doing a lot more in-person events. So maybe, you never know, women in business might actually see each other in person again. Let's also hear from our other host, Donna Saraga from the Xenia Chamber.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you've been able to enjoy the last couple of days as it's getting warmer, and I know I'm enjoying all the spring flowers that are out right now, even though that last frost did take out my magnolia tree, as it usually does every year. We have a beautiful, it's about 40-foot magnolia tree, and it lasted for about 3 days in bloom, and then the frost came, and now it looks like wet tobacco leaves all over it. It's awful. But so anyway, we still have masks here at the chamber. So if you need some for your business, your organization, let me know and I'll get those to you. Any questions about benefits that we provide that you might not be taking advantage of, I'd love to talk to you in more detail. If you know of anyone in business in the area who has hesitated about joining the chamber because of the yearly annual payment, we have initiated a recurring payment that will chop that amount up, whatever level of membership they'd like to have, into monthly reoccurring and spread it out over a 12-month period. We can do that. So please keep that in mind as you're talking to people. And hey, I've wanted to be a member, but I just don't think I can handle the membership payment. We've actually had a couple people join because we're able to do these recurring payments now. So we're also looking for nominations for, we're calling them hero nominations for our annual dinner. We have not yet set a date for that, but the planning is in the works. It's usually the end of February, but we could not hold it. We're still holding out for trying to get, you know, our 300 plus in the room at the same time, and don't know when that's going to happen yet. So we're still looking for those nominations though. We're starting to gather those, and the nomination forms and the information about what each one of them is about is on our website. So check those out. And Shannon, I'll head that back to you unless anybody has any questions for me.
Seeing no hands, I want to thank you both ladies. Please do contact Donna at xacc.com to add your friends and coworkers to the Women in Business mailing list so they too can receive information about our upcoming speakers and events. As well as please send any of your announcements and or flyers to Donna, and she will email them out from the chamber as a follow-up from this meeting. Now I would like to introduce our speaker. Retired Colonel Linda Strite Murnane. I still messed it up. See how I went? Please join me in welcoming Miss Linda to Women in Business.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thanks for the kind invitation to speak to your group today. It wasn't until my picture showed up on the website that I found out that I do business with a number of your members, and they said, "Oh, I see you're going to be speaking," and a couple of them told me they couldn't be on today, and I'm glad that you're recording this so they can see it if they want to later. So, and I hope you'll make it available to folks. Since we are in sort of this informal, and if we were at a lunch, I'd take questions from you at any time. And so we're going to make this as much like if we were at lunch, and I'll take questions from you at any time. I did put together a short slide presentation that I think you might find of interest, especially since we're all so anxious to go somewhere and do something. So I'm going to show you some places that I've been taken in my journey in the international and global practice of law. Just by way of background, I am now of counsel with Dave Cusack Law LLC, which is located in Beaver Creek. I'm a resident of Xenia, live in Xenia in the township. And have been a legal resident of Xenia since I bought my home there in 1984. But as you'll see from the slides I'm going to share, I haven't been home much. And I was in the U.S. military for 30 years on active duty. But I bought my home here when I was stationed out at Wright-Patterson as the Chief of Military Justice. And I actually, in that assignment, served as the first pro bono counsel to the Greene County Domestic Violence Project when they were first standing up. That was 30 years ago now or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I trust that everybody's going to be able to see it. And if I could just confirm that you're able to see my screen. Okay, great. I see the thumbs up. So I'm going to talk today about global legal practice, and I'm going to talk about how a young woman from, no kidding, Dillonvale, Ohio, which is a suburb in northeastern Cincinnati, wound up in the international global law community and the kinds of work that I've been doing. And the first slide that you see is actually a gorgeous photo that I took on the way to the Rungeri National Forest in Kigali, Rwanda. And my connection with Kigali and the work I did there is going to come up a little bit later in the presentation. But I'm going to start back where I'd like to begin. So in 1974, I enlisted in the United States Air Force. I enlisted in the United States Air Force because I was one of 4 children born to a family that could afford to have 2. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, my dad sat me down and explained to me that although I was a straight A student, although I was president of my student council, president of the City Classic Language League, president of the Spanish Club, and in the a cappella choir, and I danced in performances at the high school I attended in Cincinnati, that he was going to send my brothers, both of my brothers, to college, but not me. And so I had to find a way to finance an education that I had in mind for myself that included not only a bachelor's degree, but also a law degree. So what I did was what many of you have probably done. I advanced my education, whether by trade school or in professional education, by working full-time and going to school full-time and paying my tuition as I could. And as a result of that, I wound up getting a degree with a Bachelor of Arts in political science at a branch campus of the College of William and Mary. But that was my 5th college that I attended as an undergraduate. And the reason for attending 5 colleges as an undergraduate is that I went wherever the money was, wherever someone would offer me a scholarship, wherever someone would help me pay for the cost of continuing my education. And wherever I could go that I could make my schedule work flexibly around completing my college classes. I used to tell folks that I was going to write a book about how to transfer credits from one college to the other and still graduate in a timely manner, because I really became an expert at it. And I got an associate in arts degree from a community college in Virginia, and then my bachelor's degree from the branch campus of the College of William and Mary. I eventually went on to get my law degree while I was on active duty. But it wasn't without some challenges. And I think it's important, and I promised myself, if ever I had an opportunity to share the story, that people know that in 1974, when I and other women were enlisting in the United States Air Force, we were required to surrender our children for adoption before we could come on active duty. If we got pregnant, we were fired immediately. We were not allowed to stay. We were required to get out of the service. And it was so uneven on the playing field for those of us who wanted a military career that if a woman enlisted or got commissioned in the armed forces, and she had the misfortune to fall in love with and marry a man who had custody of his own children for whatever reason, that woman, when she married her partner, was required to get out, even though those were not her children. So it wasn't an equal opportunity employer, if you get my drift. So in 1976, when I got my bachelor's degree and was selected to go to officer training school, I applied later to attend the funded legal education program. And what I was told, in the funded legal education program is a service specific program. The Air Force selected 7 people a year from the entire Air Force to go to law school full time, with the idea that they would stay on for 2 times the number of years that they attended school as a lawyer for the armed forces. So most law school programs are 3 years long. That meant you would give them 6 additional years because you would give them the 3 years you went to law school and the 6 years that you served, which put you halfway to the retirement point. And usually folks would stay at that point. I applied for that program right after I got my commission, and I was told by one of the general officers who sat on the board that did not select me the first time I applied, that my application would have been more competitive if I had attended the United States Air Force Academy. And I said, but sir, women weren't eligible to go to the Air Force Academy. It was a men's only institution. And he replied, well, there is that. So again, notwithstanding what I think was a pretty uneven playing field, you see me here in this photo as the only woman judge in my circuit, unsurprisingly, because who would stay in under those conditions? Who would stay long enough to become, at the point that I was in this photo, I was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And just so you know, you may wonder, well, why does she always use her title colonel? Well, when I came in the Air Force in 1974, women were not eligible to achieve the grade of full colonel. The highest grade a woman could achieve was lieutenant colonel. And so I'm extremely proud of the achievement and walking through all those barriers. And they weren't glass ceilings. They were concrete ceilings every step along the way. And I'm extremely proud of having overcome all of those, having found a way, despite my father's lack of support for my education, to get my degree, to get my law degree, and then to be selected competitively to the bench. And then while on the bench, being selected to become a female colonel, full colonel. And that's why I use that title all the time. So here I am with my first bench. I wound up serving 10 years consecutively on the bench, where I presided at trials of US military members, Air Force members who had been charged with criminal offenses. And they took that experience, takes me all over the world, as you will see in just a few minutes. You'll see me here in my full colonel garb, meeting one of my sheroes, the first woman to sit on the Supreme Court, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. And pictured in that photo with me is my sister, Bonnie Alexander. Bonnie just recently moved to Beaver Creek after serving 40 years as a school teacher in both in California, Virginia, and in Florida. My sister Bonnie is also a shero to me. She dedicated her life to teaching children whose primary language is not English in the public school systems. And that is a particularly challenging and difficult job. Let me get my slide to advance here. So as I shared with you, my opportunity to be a judge took me to many, many places. And this is a photo of me in front of the flagpole at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, because I was eventually asked to do the first trials in the combat zone for both Operations Iraqi and Enduring Freedom. So yeah, not only was I a woman, now a colonel and a judge, but I was deployed to the combat setting to preside at trials. And I just wanted to share with you that I did everything that there was to do while I was in Qatar. And this is a picture of what that is. Nothing. Because you were restricted to staying exactly where you were. You weren't allowed to go very many places. I had luxurious living accommodations, as you can see, to make sure that any persons who wanted to come up and check in understood that there were no vacancies in the inn. You could see that the occupied sign was posted so that there was no concern about being able to check in to your room. And of course, the luxurious latrine facilities, no marble floors in the bathrooms here. I just couldn't resist sharing the photo. This is a photo of my courtrooms when I was in Operations Iraqi and Enduring Freedom. And the lower right-hand corner photo is actually a photo of what my deliberation chamber looked like at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Yes, it was outdoors. Yes, it was under a mosquito net. My actual courtroom was a converted military aircraft hangar that they took the aircraft out of during the time that I was in court. And you'll see in the upper left corner, I'm standing outside the entrance to that courtroom, and it has in the stencil at the top, it says, "Not one more life, not one more life." And you see in the lower left and in the upper right, a courtroom at another air base that I conducted a trial at Masir Island Air Base in Oman. Again, no marble floors. And so when folks talk to me about doing presentations on courtroom security, I just kind of smile and chuckle and say, are you talking about like the magnetometers and wands and the walk-through security screening, or are you talking about you want somebody who can tell them how to detect whether the grenades got the pin pulled and what you need to do to evacuate before the explosion goes off? Because for me, courtroom security had a very different meaning. This is actually some photos that were taken during my time as the chief trial judge in Europe. And I have to tell you, there is no better job in the entire global universe than serving as the chief trial judge in Europe for the United States Air Force. So let me tell you what a typical day looked like when you were the chief trial judge in Europe. You got up every morning and you looked at the docket board and you said, okay, I've got one trial coming up in the Azores. I've got a trial coming up in Turkey. I've got a trial coming up in Italy. I have 2 trials coming up in Germany. I have 4 trials coming up in the United Kingdom. I have a trial coming up in Saudi Arabia. I have a trial coming up in Oman. And I'm the chief judge, so where do I want to go? And where haven't I been yet? And it really wasn't just a question of where did I want to go. It was also, and what are the considerations I need to take into account for the judges who worked with me and for me? And, did they have family matters or other things that they needed to have me consider as well? And so, sorry. The other thing that happened, though, while I was in that role as the chief trial judge, is I was contacted by the U.S. Defense Institute for International Legal Studies, and I was asked if I would serve on the first military assistance team that was being sent to Rwanda following the genocide. This was only one of many, many, many opportunities that I had to work with the Defense Institute for International Legal Studies. And many people aren't aware that whenever you hear that there has been the sale of a weapon system or the sharing of some technology with one of our allies, there's a federal statute in the United States that requires that a component of rule of law and human rights training go along with that particular training to ensure that the weapon systems, those who will be using those weapon systems, understand the limitations of each of those weapon systems in terms of human rights and rule of law. While I was at the University of Cincinnati getting my last year of law school, because I also went to 2 different law schools while I was getting my law degree, I was an Urban Morgan Institute for International Human Rights Fellow and really focused my studies in international human rights, which has truly influenced the rest of my career in many, many ways. They asked me if I would go to Rwanda to speak to what was now the combined Tutsi and Hutu military. These are the 2 factions that had committed genocide against one another in Rwanda. I went into Rwanda on the day that Paul Kagame was inaugurated, following the sanction period that was imposed following the genocide. And I was there at their request to talk to them about free speech, free press, and how the military can better present its case to the public, because the Rwandans were concerned that there was a lack of response to their horrible plight during the period of the genocide. In the photo in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, I'm actually with the US ambassador to Rwanda, who is standing to my right, and with the defense minister for Rwanda at the end of our program. During the time before I became a lawyer and a judge for the military, my military service, when I wasn't attending school full time, was actually as a journalist doing both photo and print journalism for the United States Air Force. So I had both sets of skills when I went there, understanding the role of the journalist and the often difficult role of a military journalist to tell their story in a way that communicates effectively to the general public. But also, I had the background as a lawyer and as a human rights attorney. Again, this is that sunrise at Kigali. So while I was in Rwanda, I had the opportunity. They called me one day and said, while I was in Rwanda, and said, how would you like to go trekking with the Dian Fossey gorillas in the mist? Now, I'm sorry, who wouldn't raise their hand and say, I want to go trek with the Dian Fossey gorillas in the mist? We all want to go trek with the Dian Fossey gorillas in the mist, right? What a dream come true. But at that point in my career, I had actually had 5 knee operations. And I was like, so please, can you tell me how long is the trek and how strenuous is it? Because I didn't want to wind up causing a problem. And Rwanda was still not a safe place. And for those of you who have watched Gorillas in the Mist, you know that Dian Fossey was killed by poachers in the Rwengari forest. And so it's not an entirely safe thing. And I had to evaluate my ability to escape. Like, I can't run, but it was so funny because when we got to the forest that morning, our guide actually said, now, if the gorillas charge you while you're on the trek, don't run, don't scream, drop down, look at the ground and stand still. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be me running and screaming at the top of my lungs if one of these gorillas come at me. But I couldn't run. And so I had to evaluate, whether with my knee conditions, whether I was going to be able to do this trek safely for those around me as well as myself. Now, they only take 12 folks up on the gorilla trek at a time, so it wasn't like there was going to be a huge group. But in any event, they told me that they had signed me up for the 15-minute boutique trek. So I thought, well, what the heck? Who wouldn't do 15 minutes to see the gorillas, no matter what it took, right? I can do 15 minutes. Anybody can do 15 minutes, right? We can do 15 minutes. But I have to tell you, after 15 minutes on the trek, the morning that I was at the Rwengari forest, all I could think of was, there must have been a serious mistake here, because unless these gorillas also hoe potatoes, we aren't anywhere near where the gorilla live, because I knew that they were in the higher elevation and we hadn't even started climbing yet. It turned out that it was a 4-hour trek to where the gorillas were, uphill, 6,000 feet above sea level. So my concept of 15 minutes, and whoever it was that mistakenly told me it was a 15-minute trek's concept of 15 minutes were not the same. Fortunately, the trek returning from the gorilla experience was not 4 hours. That's because the gorilla trek on the way down is all mud through bamboo, and you just slide in the mud. You just slide down the side of the mountain in the mud. I was absolutely covered head to toe in mud when I got on the other side. And I can tell you this, for any of you who wind up going to a gorilla trek, don't reach out and grab bamboo to break your fall. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's that simple. But the sunrise itself was gorgeous. These are actual photos taken while I was up with the gorilla in the Rwengari forest. And yes, I was that close. They are amazing creatures. And it was an experience that I will treasure forever in my life. All right. Let me see. Looks like Yeah, so it looks like those are all the photos that I have to share with you today. I did want to let you know, hang on just a second, because I have one more photo I wanted to make sure I shared with you. Hang on. Let me bring it up. So it turned out that following my experience, hang on just a minute. Yeah. Following my experiences that I had, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again because there was something missing there. Hang on. Following my experiences that I had in Rwanda, I was also invited to go to Liberia. And I thought it was important to share with you some of the actual scenes of how folks lived in Liberia. I really think that there would be great benefit to some of our young people having the opportunity to see what true poverty looks like, because these were actual homes in Liberia. And while there, again, I was training military folks for whom a weapon system had been found. I also went to Riga, Latvia. Now I have to tell you in truth, when I went to Riga, Latvia, and they called me and said, will you come to Riga, Latvia? I had to look up where Latvia was on the map. I didn't even know where it was. I was asked to go to Latvia specifically to address issues related to their interest in becoming a partner with NATO. And the challenge that they had in becoming a partner in NATO was that they didn't have a mobile military justice system. Our US airmen, if they commit a crime, they are tried by a US military judge with all the full protections afforded to us under the US Constitution. Latvia did not have a similar system. So I was asked when they had applied to join NATO to assist them in writing a military justice code for a military service branch that had no more than 6 military attorneys in the entire service. This is the inside of that courtroom I told you about. And that is the inside of a hangar. You see the elaborate wiring scheme for my electronics and all of the things. And one of the things that I have to share with you, because this is just an incredible, this was an incredible experience. There was no latrine facility in the hangar. And so if you were thinking that you needed a bathroom break, you needed to be moving because the latrine, I'm sorry, this is just so funny, I have to share it. The latrine was a camouflaged brown portalette out in the middle of a sand-covered desert. And the day of the trial, there was a sandstorm. And I'm telling you, you have not lived life to the fullest until you've had to find a camouflaged brown portalette in a sandstorm. And it was about a 15-minute trek to get to the latrine. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So I'm now going to show you some photos that I actually took when I was on that trip to Rwanda and working in Rwanda. And some of these photos are quite graphic. They don't show anything that you wouldn't see at the Holocaust Museum, but if you're a person that's easily upset by seeing bones of individuals who have been slaughtered, then you might want to just turn your head away from the screen for just the next couple of slides. When I went to Rwanda, I visited 5 of the genocide sites. This is after the United Nations had been in and had cleaned up. I did not meet anyone in Rwanda who had not lost at least 10 family members in the genocide. What happened there was a horrible, horrible experience for them and for the world. And it really, what it did for me is it called me to go back to this line of work, which you'll see how I implemented in just a little bit. And there's the photos with again, the Minister of Defense. And again, on my trek with the Dian Fossey gorillas. This is my favorite gorilla of the whole trip. It's often what I look like when I'm lying on my couch in the evening. I also went to Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. If you don't know where Papua New Guinea is, I didn't either before I went there. It was perhaps the single most challenging trip of my entire career. I nearly died while I was there. And I nearly died because three of my colleagues and I, on the way walking back from a restaurant that was about 4 blocks away from our hotel, we were attacked in the street, robbed, and at knife point. And it was really quite a startling experience. I went to Papua New Guinea because in Papua New Guinea, when they were restored to an independent nation status, they had a cabinet meeting where leaders of the cabinet decided that they should spend tax dollar money to kill the people who owned the copper mine that they wouldn't sell. And their way of nationalizing it is they were going to hire mercenaries using taxpayer dollars to kill the people that owned the mine. So anytime that you're using tax dollars to kill the citizens intentionally, it's a bad thing. And I went there to tell them all about why that's so. It was a fascinating trip. Eventually that led me, my interest in this work and my experience, particularly in Rwanda, led me to begin applying for positions with the United Nations. And I wound up spending 8 years working with the United Nations, principally stationed in The Hague in the Netherlands, doing war crimes cases for individuals from both the fall of the former Yugoslavia, cases like Radovan Karadzic, Ratko Mladic, the Milutinovic et al. Trials, Šešelj and Perlic were all my cases. And you can see me here in the courtroom with a couple of different judges. We were trying individuals who were leaders of nations who had committed acts of horrible genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Everybody thinks this is where I worked. That's actually the Peace Palace. Our courtroom was a similarly elaborate court, but it was not the Peace Palace. The Peace Palace is the home of the World Court. People often call the court I was in the World Court. That's incorrect. The World Court was founded at the end of World War I in an effort to bring peace, and it's a place where nations bring lawsuits against other nations. My cases were criminal trials of individuals accused of performing acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This is a photo of my Perlic team. And why do I show it? In stark contrast to the first photo that you saw of me with my team of judges, you will see how many women are in this photo. And we do have one man because, we are appreciative of gender diversity and how important that might be. I was also given the opportunity to speak in Sarajevo and in Macedonia, and I actually had teams that worked for me in Sarajevo, although I did not have any teams in Macedonia. Again, this is at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia on the left, and on the right, I went on to work as the Chief of Court Management at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, where we tried 5 Hezbollah indicted for the assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, the former Prime Minister of Lebanon. Eventually, I went back to Rwanda while I was working for the United Nations. This is the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, which is actually physically located in Tanzania, but I did in fact get to go back to my beloved Rwanda, which I dearly, dearly love. And again, this is more photos in the courtroom. Again, my travels in the international global community have taken me all around the world, and I've met and had the opportunity to visit with a number of people that I consider sheroes. This is another photo of Sandra Day O'Connor meeting with me, but also Sonia Sotomayor at the National Association of Women Judges in California. And this is a luncheon that I helped to organize that Ruth Bader Ginsburg spoke at the Women in Military Service Memorial for America. Justice Ginsburg, a lot of people don't know about her. She was a military wife. Her husband was in the U.S. Army during part of her time married to her husband of many years. And many people also don't know that in 1976, the Department of Defense had to abandon its overt discrimination against women having children in the military, in major part because of work that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did when she was working for the American Civil Liberties Union before she went to the Supreme Court. In fact, before she went to any bench as a judge. She took the cases of Susan Strunk and people like Susan Strunk who didn't want to separate from the service when they had children. And it was through her efforts and the efforts of a handful of dedicated women at the American Civil Liberties Union that I'm able to say today that I was both a colonel and have two daughters who are now themselves productive citizens. And I'm forever grateful to her for that work. Again, photos of the tribunal. I also teach now in Austria every other year. I'm responsible for a course that assists in having all of the European Union military legal advisors trained, and I teach on fundamental issues related to war crimes. Lest you think that I only go in Europe or in Southwest Asia or Northern Africa. No, I also have been to Ecuador in the tropical rainforest. I had occasion to do some work on anti-corruption with the judiciary there. And the picture on the far right, if you can't tell what that is, it's one of the ugliest and biggest snakes I've ever seen in my whole life. It was pretty freaky. This is a group of judges that I had the opportunity to work with in the American Bar Association. I was the chair of the Judicial Division of the American Bar Association for a year. And this is a program that I organized in Athens, Greece, talking about international law principles. There's nothing quite like giving a presentation with the ancient ruins of Greece as your background. I've also had the opportunity to speak in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I worked with the military in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In this photo on the left, I'm with the former president of the National Association of Women Judges, Judge Tamila Epima, who is a US judge, but an immigrant from Iran. And on the far right, I'm at the US Embassy in Argentina. Perhaps one of the most remarkable days of my career was the day that I was invited to come to the US Supreme Court. This is a photo in the US Supreme Court's waiting area, one of their reception rooms. And all of the people in this photo are individuals whose admission before the US Supreme Court I was privileged to move. There's just something really special about having the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court say, the Supreme Court recognizes the Honorable Linda Murnane. Ms. Murnane, would you come to the podium, please? Oh my gosh, that was like such a moment in history. And after I left the US Supreme Court, after the admission of all of the people that you see in the photo on the left, and of course that's me in front of the Supreme Court on the right, I flew from there to New York, where I spoke at the United Nations. And I spoke at the United Nations on the issue of the need for whistleblower protections for individuals who are employees of the United Nations who are experiencing sexual harassment, sexual assault, and related misconduct. Eventually, the American Bar Association selected me to receive an award they call the Margaret Brent Award. That award actually is a pyramid full of broken glass, representing glass ceilings, broken by women opening doors for other women. When I gave my acceptance speech, which is available online, if you Google on my name and you go to Margaret Brent, you'll see the 13-minute speech I gave where I called out the U.S. military for all of the discrimination and activities that I experienced. But in one part of it, my favorite part, I said, perhaps the reason I got this award is because I never learned to say, gosh, I don't think so. That sounds dangerous. This is a group of lawyers and judges that I brought with me to The Hague while I was chair of the Judicial Division. This is actually the court area that I was responsible for at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. This photo is taken in front of the stairs going up to the 3 courtrooms. And then the thing that brought Shannon and I together that led to her actually inviting me to come and speak is a discussion I had in June of 2019. I was invited to speak at the Vatican. And I spoke on the issue of veterans treatment courts as a way to end homelessness, poverty, and drug addiction for military service members who have suffered the effects of post-traumatic stress. And while I was specifically oriented toward the work that I've done with veterans treatment courts in the United States, and I've done quite a lot, in fact, it was a global Pan-American conference organized by Pope Francis, and I was invited to speak. And top left, it's me on the monitor. You can actually hear part of the speech. While we were there, we were invited by the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, Ambassador Carlissa Gingrich at the time, to come to a reception at the U.S. Embassy. And some of you may recognize her as her husband, who happens to be the former Speaker of the House. And the people who are with me in that photo are my daughter, Rachel, and my grandson, Aiden. My daughter, Rachel, was born blind and deaf while I was on active duty in the Air Force. Her hearing has been repaired. She's legally blind. She's a science teacher in a sighted middle school in Broussard, Louisiana. And at the end of that meeting, I had the opportunity to meet the Holy Father in person, up close, one-on-one. It was a moment that I will treasure forever, and something that was really, really memorable. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I hope you've all had that virtual tour of the world during my experiences working in the international human rights area. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. It sounds like
I don't have a question, just a comment. Like, what an amazing life you've had. You're awesome. And at first I was like so mad at your dad, but now I'm not. You're amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. Let me just share with you. I'm currently writing a book because when I was at that reception at the U.S. Embassy in the Holy See, Newt Gingrich said to me, so when you go to the embassy, for anybody who hasn't had that experience, when you go to the embassy, there are like these handler people. And the handlers all say, you know, okay, you have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and introduce your party. And this is what you should say, and then move on so that the flow of people coming into the reception doesn't get backed up and people can get to the bar and, you know, do whatever it is that they're going to do. And so they told me what to say. And I went up to him with my business card in my hand, and I handed it to him, and I handed it to the ambassador. And I said, I'm Colonel Linda Murnane, United States Air Force retired. I did the first combat trials, deployed to the combat zone in Iraqi and Enduring Freedom. And I worked for the United Nations at war crimes trials for 8 years after I retired. That's all I said. And Newt Gingrich said to me, you ought to write a book. And I said, yeah, I really probably should. But Mr. Gingrich, writing a book takes a lot of time and effort. For any of you who has written a book, you know that's true. And for anyone who reads a book, you know and appreciate how much effort goes into the people writing a book, especially an autobiographical book. And he said to me, I'll get you an editor and I'll get you a publisher. And if I need to, I'll get you a ghostwriter. And I said, well, that's very kind, Mr. Gingrich. Of course, I thought, yeah, that like, right. Yeah, Newt Gingrich is going to write me and tell me about an editor and a publisher, like, really, seriously? What a nice thing to say in a receiving line just before the cocktail hour, right? But 2 days later, what happens? I get an email from, no kidding, Newt Gingrich with the names of 3 potential editors. And I interviewed them all, and I selected one, and we've been working on the book for over a year now. She actually wanted to have it out 3 months after we met, but I told her, I said, the journey I went on is so painful in so many respects, in ways that I can't really describe in a 30-minute talk. The pain that I endured, primarily during my service years, in the environment that I worked in, is just too much. And I said, I can't do it in 3 months. I need to do it in small increments, because the one thing I will tell you is that if you're going to do this, you need to give yourself time to recover after you finish a chapter. And you need to regroup and re-energize and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So we're hoping to get it finished before the end of this year, and I think we will. But in writing the book, I explained the situation with my dad by saying he motivated me by allowing me to develop what I refer to as an oh yeah relationship, which meant he said he wouldn't pay for my college and that I would just have to get it on my own. And I went, oh yeah. And then when I got selected to go to law school, and I called him and told him the day I found out I was selected as one of 7 women to go to law school or 7 people in the entire Air Force, not women, 7 people in the entire Air Force to go on a funded program. I found out I was pregnant with my first child. That was in 1977. Now, you may remember that in 1976, I would have been kicked out. So 1 year later, they had not sent a woman to a funded graduate program. And so the first thing they told me I had to do was pass a physical. Well, then they sent in the physical and they said, I'm sorry, you can't pass the physical because you suffer from an enlarged uterus. No kidding. This is a normal condition given that I'm pregnant, right? And so they tried to kick me out of the program, and it's only because of a guy named John Pastay, who was a 2-star general that was my immediate supervisor at the time. And he went to bat for me and said, I don't care if you've never sent a pregnant woman to law school before, you've not met this woman. And so 8 months pregnant, I start law school full time, commuting 50 miles each way, 50 miles to the law school, 50 miles back. My first year of law school, I commuted 200 miles a night, 4 nights a week to night law after work as a second lieutenant. But my second year, I was only 8 months pregnant and only had to commute 100 miles a day until the second day of law school, when my then husband, the father of my children, who is now deceased, was paralyzed from the waist down with an L5-S1 spinal compression. And as a result of that, I physically relocated to a temporary lodging facility at the base where he was hospitalized because he was in the military. I then commuted until the day I went into labor 1,000 miles a week and went to law school full time and stayed by his bedside. He had his first of 6 spinal cord surgeries 2 days before I delivered our baby. And I had my first child by C-section after laboring 23 hours unsuccessfully, missed 10 days of class and went back to school after 10 days following a C-section with an infant and a husband recuperating from back surgery. And with my second child, I missed 5 days after my second C-section and went back to class. So when I start to tell the story, I really have to take a day off after I just write about it. When I called my dad and said I had gotten one of those 7 slots to go to law school, my father's reaction to that was not fantastic. I'm so proud of you. What he said to me was, you can't go to law school and have a baby. What do you think you're doing? And that oh yeah relationship that I had, oh yeah, watch me, led to my graduating a semester early with honors, having won the American Jurisprudence Award for Academic Excellence in Constitutional Law the semester I had my first child. If you ever want to not get me to do something, tell me it can't be done. I'm sorry. You're done. You're done. Because it can be done. And the presentation I give to a lot of high school kids is that there's no such thing as can't. And that may be the title of my book.
I thought maybe you would call it, oh yeah.
Good idea, Donna. Let me think about it. My editor and I haven't decided on a name for it yet. Hi, Lisa. You do have a question? You're on mute.
Sorry, I want to unmute. Sorry, I muted. I just want to say, ma'am, you are an inspiration. Even at my age, I'm sitting here thinking, what else can I achieve in my life and what goals can I meet? I do work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a contractor, so I've worked with many great women in the military. And I just want to say I'm very honored to hear you speak today, and you're just an inspiration. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. So I want to share with you something that I do as a constant motivational tool. On my console where my big screen TV sits next to where I put the remote control every night, there's a stone, and on it is etched the words, "It's never too late." It's never too late. Every single day, I reinforce that message by looking at it. So if you don't have a stone that has that written on it, and you don't want to make a stone or buy a stone that has that written on it, put it on a piece of paper where you reinforce it every day. It's never too late.
Well, I want to give you a round of applause because
Thank
that
you.
was, as I knew it would be, a wonderful journey to share with us. And thank you, because your journey shows that perseverance. You had perseverance to get your own education, which I myself have also done with no assistance other than from the government and every scholarship I could get a hold of. But then perseverance to equality for women and receiving your titles. I mean, you are a colonel and you deserve that right. And then perseverance for human and civil rights of others, not only in our own country, but then in neighboring countries and around the world. I mean, it just amazes me. So thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate you sharing your journey with us.
Thank you, Shannon. I met Shannon through her work on the Day of Caring Board. I also am on the Children's Historical Publishing Board, and I work with the Dayton Women's Club president on some things as well. So if I can be of service to any of you, if you have a group of students that need to be inspired, and I talk to students in particular all the time, because what I want them to know and what I want you to know is I'm really just I really am an ordinary person. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. I guarantee you.
Well, I can't wait for your book. Please share with the Xenia Chamber so that we know when it comes out, and we'll definitely be reading, and shoot, you might start a book club with us. Who knows? So
That's great. Thank you.
It was truly great to see everyone today as we stay physically distant but socially close. And I thank you again for everyone joining us. Please be on the lookout for the upcoming e-weekly emails for more information on next month's meeting. It will be coming to you live on the third Thursday of May on the 20th. We will be celebrating 10 years of networking next month. So please still be sure to send to our committee members, Donna, myself, Elaine, Sandy, forgetting some people, Christy, if she wants to belong to us too. Send us what you want to hear for our next, upcoming year. This is a milestone, and any topics, any other great speakers that you know of, please let us know and we'll be sure to have them because we want to make our 10th anniversary one to remember. In closing, I wanted to share with you something that I learned. On CBS This Morning last week, they interviewed CNN anchor Brooke Baldwin, and she has a new book entitled Huddled Up, and they discussed the power of women who work together. And Ms. Baldwin stated that a huddle is a place where women come together and are empowered by the mere fact of their coexistence. A huddle can be big or small, as the size is not as important as just having one. And it is good to have a huddle you can count on for all things. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Women in Business Huddle. I look forward to celebrating with you all next month as we begin our new chapter for Women in Business Journey. So have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.